events that impact and shape China and the rest of the world. This is the Beijing Hour, 1 hour of news and information brought to you every weekday. Now here's your host,
Shane Bigham with you on this Wednesday, September 21st, 2022. You're listening to the Beijing Hour, live from the Chinese capital. On today's program, the Russian president's ordered the first military mobilization of his country since World War II. China's marking World Alzheimer's Day. And Uganda's health ministry has confirmed an Ebola outbreak in the central part of the country. In business, China boosts loan support for the manufacturing industry. In sports, a star Chinese striker has made his first appearance since returning to the CSL. In culture and entertainment, a gold mask found in the tomb of an ancient noble in Hunan province. Now the day's top stories. President Vladimir Putin's ordered Russia's first military mobilization since World War II. The partial mobilization comes as Russia battles a Ukrainian counteroffensive that's forced its troops to retreat from some occupied territory. Putin says the mobilization is to defend Russia and its territories, arguing that the West does not want peace in Ukraine. Putin also warned the West that if it continues what he called its nuclear blackmail, Moscow would respond with the might of all of its vast arsenal. Stuart Smith has more from Moscow.
Well, from this announcement, it sounds like 300,000 more soldiers will be sent to Ukraine, or at least involved in the military operation, as it's still referred to here. The difference being that these 300,000 reservists may not have had any recent military experience. They are coming from a cohort of around 25 million Russian men who mandatorily will have been trained at some point in their lives, usually late teens, early 20s, in how to act during a military campaign, but they may not have had any recent knowledge. Having said that, the Defense Minister, Sergei Shoigu, said that these men would be drafted based on their experience and based on the skills they have to offer. He suggested, rather than broad sweep of the reserve population, it would be like a sieve, carefully selecting each individual. We've not heard any reports yet of these people being approached, and so we're in a seemingly transition phase whereby many Russians will be fearing this morning that they are potentially going to be called up to fight, but not knowing yet whether they are one of the people that will be selected. It means is talking about a major threat to Russian territory. That's why he says this move is justified, because Russia is facing an existential threat, not just from Ukraine, he says, but also from NATO and the United States. And requires what he calls partial mobilization.
That was Stuart Smith reporting. Meantime, Russian installed leaders in occupied areas of 4 Ukrainian regions have set out plans for referendums on joining Russia. Ukraine and its allies have dismissed the move as a stunt by Moscow to try to reclaim the initiative after battlefield losses. And they say it'll sharply escalate the conflict. Julia Chapman has more.
Well, Ukrainian officials have all been pretty unified in the fact that they believe this is a response to Russian losses on the battlefield after Ukraine took back vast swathes of the Kharkiv region in the last few weeks, putting Russia on the back foot. They believe that the referendums that have been announced and today's partial mobilization are a response to that and a sign that the Russian army is present in Ukraine. An advisor to Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky said today that this is a predictable step that will prove to be extremely unpopular, and it underscores that the war is not going to Moscow's plan. The mayor of Kyiv, Vitaly Klitschko, said that President Vladimir Putin has launched a process that will bury him, and said that this shows that evil must be destroyed radically and not through peace talks. Ukrainian officials adamant that they will continue their efforts to take back control of all Ukrainian territory, not just the gains that Moscow has made since February 24th, but the Donbass region and annexed Crimea as well. So they are not taking this news as a sign that anything will change. It certainly won't affect Ukraine's position or its approach to this war.
That was Julia Chapman reporting. A Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson is calling for a solution to the Ukraine issue through dialogue and consultation. Wang Wenbin made the remarks after Russian President Vladimir Putin warned the West over what he described as nuclear blackmail. The spokesperson says China's position on the Ukraine issue is consistent and clear. He calls for respect for the sovereignty and territorial integrity of all countries and full observation of the purposes and principles of the UN Charter. Wang adds that China maintains that all countries' legitimate security concerns must be taken seriously, and that all efforts conducive to the peaceful settlement of the crisis must be supported. The general debate of the 77th session of the UN General Assembly is opened in New York. The event convenes at a time when the world is beset by various challenges. As Tony Waterman reports, one of the issues dominating the discussions is the Russia-Ukraine conflict.
The Secretary General was rather grim in his opening remarks, certainly more somber than we've seen him in recent years. In fact, the very first thing he said to world leaders is, our world is in big trouble. And that was certainly a sentiment that we heard echoed from a lot of heads of state who gave their address today. The French President Emmanuel Macron really focused his address on the widening global divisions over Ukraine and the ramifications of that conflict, this deepening energy crisis, a deepening food crisis, 50 million people now on the edge of starvation, another 345 million people finding it difficult to put food on the table at night, and the president of France saying that this is a conflict that risks dividing the world.
Se trompe et prend une responsabilité.
Those who are keeping silent today are in effect complicit with the cause of a new imperialism, a new order that is trampling over the current order, and there is no peace possible here. Russia is seeking to uphold a double standard, that the war in Ukraine must not be a conflict that leaves anyone indifferent.
The concern among a lot of people here is that this conflict is not only diverting energy and resources away from addressing other pressing issues like climate change, nuclear disarmament, and eradicating poverty, but that it is undermining trust between governments, between citizens and their governments, and that it's going to become very difficult to properly address these other challenges in the future. The Turkish President Erdogan said in his address that he would like to broker this peace deal between Ukraine and Russia. And he said that there needs to be a dignified way out of this war.
Etkin çok taraflılığın.
We think that the war will never have a triumph and a fair peace process will not have a loser. This is important because we are always underlining the significance of diplomacy and the settlement of disputes through dialogue once and for all.
In an interview with the American broadcaster PBS, President Erdogan said that he got the impression that Russian President Vladimir Putin wanted a speedy end to this war. This is after extensive discussions with him in Uzbekistan just last week. He has also called on Russia to return all of the land that